Hello and welcome to Discover Energy Work. Today I have, no, I can't remember your name, Stephen Cheung, isn't it?
Chris Cheung.
Chris Cheung. Where did I get
Cheung.
that? Where did Stephen Cheung come from? Anyway, okay, well, Stephen Cheung out there, thanks for dropping in. We have Chris Cheung here, and Chris was introduced to me by Hofan Chow, and I was sort of saying to Chris, so how do I introduce you? And it's like, he's just got this incredibly broad series of tools which he uses, from sound to movement to entering into that very special space where real change is possible. And I'm really excited because I know nothing about what Chris is going to tell me. And so welcome, Chris. How are you today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing good. I just went outside before we jumped on the call. I live on the island of Hawaii, and I'm feeling good.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Excited to share with you, Richard.
I'm in this beautiful place, Thailand, and I'm feeling like a little bit of envy. I'm in like paradise myself. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in paradise. He said, no, I'm in paradise. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, what we were talking about before we started was like these incredible experiences that you've had, and we didn't even really talk about them. I said, well, I had these. I said I'm a Taoist, and you said, well, I was introduced to Taoist masters in a special space, and I'm like, oh wow, cool. I'd love to hear about that. But where did your journey begin? Because like I always say to people, like, why on earth, when you've got the opportunity of being, say, a banker or a businessman making millions, and why on earth would you choose this path? What happened?
Yep. Well, for me, I was that kind of banking finance individual, chasing the notion of success that's given to us by our culture. My parents were born in Hong Kong, and I was born and raised in Australia. Yet I still had all of the Chinese upbringing and culture that was very strong. The success-driven, need to be very focused on academics, etc. And so I went down that road of worshiping money, and I was partying. I was addicted to drugs. I was addicted to pornography. My life was going this way up in society and in my career, but yet my emotional and trauma and depth of healing was going this way. And it eventually collided completely when I was in a drunken arm wrestle and I broke my arm wrestling.
What, like snapped?
Snapped. My humerus fractured. I have the scar still.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that would be a torsion fracture. That would like twist and snap. Oh,
unwound. The humerus unwound it.
That's like the worst.
About 10 seconds. And then I went into surgery. I had 2 plates in my arm. And during the surgery, I had, I guess, some kind of really deep, I would just say near-death experience that I don't necessarily remember the imagery behind it, but when I woke up, I had this overwhelming feeling of needing to change my life.
Right.
And
so your break point was a break point.
That was literally a break point.
Yeah.
I would say it was one of the best things that could happen to me right at my Saturn return at the age of around 27, 28.
Yeah.
And,
isn't that interesting? Saturn returns.
Yeah. And that was when I went down the path of what I knew to be self-development. And all I knew, being an athlete and a sports person at the beginning, was just to work on my physical body. So it was just about going to the gym, exercising. I already studied years of martial arts, like the Shaolin Wushu, Kung Fu kind of thing. It was very machismo. And I was, sparring with the champion MMA fighters. It was very, very alpha male style
Who
when I
you can
came
beat,
out of that,
I think. Who you can beat
pretty
is
much
how good you are, you know.
highly in competition. When I
Yeah,
came out of that, I decided I wasn't going to do that. I wanted to work on dancing. I wanted to learn hip hop dancing. I wanted to learn um, like softer forms of movement. So that's when I started doing when I started learning dance. So I took up different forms of movement, which
right.
eventually led me down to diet. But I realized at some point on that physical journey, on that physical, what I call like body recomposition or physical recomposition path of self-development, I was still stuck. I was still quite addicted to alcohol. My relationships still were falling apart.
Mm,
I had no emotional depth. I had no words for emotions.
mm,
I, although I felt like something was changing, I was still very lost, very,
mm,
very lost. And so I started to, as I began dancing and as I got a couple of years worth of dance in my belt, I started to embody more, like, let's say, the feminine energy, to become more in touch with earth and the flow, the flowiness of
mm.
how things can be, like, let's say, water, for instance. And it was as though my whole psyche was shifting with that. And so that's kind of what started to take me down the road of wanting to um, find out more about certain dreams or esoteric or metaphysical things, you could say psychic things that I had experienced in my younger years
Mm.
that nobody really had an answer for me. My
Oh,
parents were
oh,
devout Catholics,
right.
and although I encountered ghosts, encountered spirits, um, and I had dreams that were prophetic, that would tell me things about the future, like about my life, that would all
Yep,
play out true.
yep.
I was like, why? What is all of this? And so that's when I came across like some Tibetan works. I started to look more into that's when I came across the works of Drunvalo, actually, you know, Drunvalo Melchizedek, and his works around Serpent of Light and that kind of thing. And I started to delve into some of these readings about sacred geometry, and because I came from a science and mathematics background, that work kind of helped me bridge this gap that exists in, you know, most of today's mainstream education, which is um, metaphysical, which
Chris,
is actually there's a science. Yeah,
can I ask you
sorry.
to just, because I'm curious right now, I'm curious about um, children's experiences, and kind of like I feel that in our society, children are kind of lost when they have these experiences. There's absolutely, we're told, like, Bowlby's attachment theory, children need to be seen, they need to be loved, and they need to be safe. And then they're having experiences which are kind of like, it's rejection experiences in a way. Once they have that experience, like, no, you didn't. Or so, could you tell me, I'm just curious, if it's okay, what actually happened, what were the experiences, and what was the reaction to them, and what do you think should have been the better reaction?
Um, they were. It was like, let's say, I would I would really dislike someone intensely, for instance. And I would say something like, I wish that this person would break a leg. And in that moment, and like literally within that same day, that person would break their leg. And I would hear these voices in my head saying, be careful what you wish for, and things
Right.
like this. So I had a very strong manifesting capability as a child that I shut off completely
Mm.
because I got really scared of types of experience. And That's one type of experience of like
Wow.
being scared of our own power. Another type of experience is like where we would feel the sensation of ghosts or presences in the room.
Mm.
And you know, that I wouldn't even, I'd be too scared to even talk about it to my parents out of fear for the fact that they would just simply judge me, or they they have the capacity there to have understood me at that point in time. So I felt it was just futile to raise it with them,
Right.
right? Or
You,
night terrors, being attacked in your dreams, waking up from the night terror and then not feeling comforted, but instead shamed for crying. So stop crying. It's nothing to be scared of. Go back to sleep.
it's interesting. I mean, there's an interesting parallel because number one is you had that vision of disliking somebody, and your reaction was break a bone, and then you broke your own bone. Yeah, I was like, wow, what an interesting parallel with the arm wrestle. But what what do you what would you say to I think you're a father now, aren't you? So what would you say to yourself as a father, you know, you as your own father, or what sort of reaction do you think would be more useful to you, knowing you as you were and knowing you now?
Well, it's quite a bit different because I have the sight of the unseen realms. So I know what's going on because I see ghosts and spirits and I'm interacting with them and other entities, star beings and not of this world, or hollow earth beings, interacting with the middle worlds. And so, and I'm able to tap into my child's dream time and actually see what's going on there. So it's
Oh,
very, very different uh, raising my child because, like, even though she's 10 months, I know if she's getting attacked, like, this whole dream space here is fortified. There's
right,
a whole bunch of different protection, other astral, unseen realm things that I've done that stop that from happening because there's a protection that we say we need as children, right? But we need it in both the seen and the unseen realms. Who's going to do that protection in the unseen realms? If
right,
your parents aren't there to do it, who's going to do it for you? If
right.
you have no capacity to see into the unseen realms, how are you going to protect? Not just your child, but yourself.
It's a
How are you
fantastic
going to protect
question.
them?
Yeah, I think this is missing. I think it's, you know, what a great question.
It's completely missing. And I mean, places like, for instance, Bali or Thailand, you know, I kind of call them like the refugee centers of the unseen realms. And, you know, I might walk into a cafe. It's like walking into an airport. There's thousands and thousands of spirits and other entities buzzing around the room, literally for me. And it's very loud for me, although I might be the only person in the cafe.
Right.
So it's like, you know, that environment I would never place my child into
Mm.
because I know that she's going to be overwhelmed and she's going to be like, what are you doing here? Right. But
Right,
most other people would just walk straight in. Oh, it's empty. Great. It's peaceful. But
right.
why is my child crying now?
It's um, I feel like, well, at least I can relate from the point of view, like my awakening experience was, um, as an adult, was like experiencing energy, and you could have something that looked great, but if you felt the energy, it was like, oh, it's toilet, yeah, it's awful, like just don't go near it, and that being so different from what you could see, and so having that knowledge, you know, I mean, I always go places and I don't check what it looks like, I check what the energy's like. So
Yeah, which is actually a very good way of discernment. The thing is, there's a lot of what I would just call like false light beings who appear very, you know, not healthy is not the right word, but let's say on your side kind of thing. Like I'm such a good energy. I look at my bright light here.
mm,
But they're what I would just simply call false light beings that in your discernment through your feeling, you would feel through that and go, you feel a bit shady here. Why do I feel you're shady, but why do you not look like the same thing as how you feel? Right? It's like a pig putting makeup on. It's
Yeah,
still a pig.
I think they sound like the narcissists of the energy world. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, like the outside
So
stuff.
yeah, there's a large element of discernment that's accessible in the feeling space, over, above, and beyond just what we see.
Mm.
The eyes are easy to deceive. The feeling, especially from the heart-centered space, is much harder to decipher.
Yeah.
But even these things begin to evolve in who we choose to interact with, later on, depending on the kind of work we've done for ourselves in integrating our light and our shadow. We have often, many of us have this resistance or this fear of like darker entities. And this, I went through big initiations with the Immortal Masters. The
Yeah,
Immortal
tell me
Duality.
about that. What happened there? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, well, this was in my second dark room experience in Thailand, at Tao Garden in Chiang Mai,
Oh, yeah.
where you sort of spend 9 days in darkness. You don't eat, you're fasting, so you're deep in meditation. And it was in that space that they introduced themselves to me, and they started to teach me the original Tao, not the textbook stuff. So I've never picked up anything textbook related around Taoism, but this is before the corruption, even as to what we read in the Tao Te Ching, things like this.
Mm.
And so what they showed me was that I had this behavior, this pattern of when I would encounter dark beings to want to annihilate them, just destroy them, get them out of here. And this, they showed me how destructive this was. And they showed me their lifetimes of how they would go through different places around Asia, etc., clearing energy, clearing spaces and places of residual bad juju. And I noticed myself going through and initially just wanting to annihilate everything behind them. But they showed me how they were doing it, which was not just a place of, it was what I call walking the middle way. It's a path of neutrality. But the path of neutrality comes from a full embrace and acceptance, not just acceptance of light and dark, but a full embrace of all that is light and all that is dark. All that is done, basically, a full embrace of all
Yeah.
to come to the middle way. So it's a point of neutrality from a full embrace of the whole spectrum of the yin and the yang.
You know,
And
I find this is really beautifully said. And you know, I find I met this black man in American black man. So in one of the malls, and we're just chatting, and I said, look, all of this, a lot of this prejudice and that comes in the world with this racial prejudice and so on comes from a very simple thing. It's that like we want to go to the light and we're trying to escape from the dark. And until we can recognize the duality and embrace it, we're going to have a problem. And it is literally like, even, you know, the black people, they go, oh no, I want to move into the light. I'm like, guys, I'm not saying in any way embrace demonic beings at all. Like, you've got to try and work out what I'm trying to say, yeah. But it's not. It's exactly. We tend to have this. Yeah, people go ghost hunting and they want to annihilate the beings. But there's a wonderful show. If I forget what it's called, we have these two old dears from England traveling around the world, and when they go to a haunted house, they're trying to get the story, and then saying, okay, you need, yeah, that was really terrible for you. So they're kind of doing like trauma release with the spirit, and then they lead them to the light, and then suddenly everything's okay in that house. And you know that they're literally, you know, they're sort of couldn't be more stereotypic English, you know, grandmothers with their, you know, cups of tea and going out for gin and tonics afterwards, and they're so normal, and yet they've got that vision in the realm. So I mean, I just love what you're saying. It's really beautiful. And so you were taken in that 10 days to these different places, and did your life change after that?
No, it took me another 6 to 9 months after that to integrate all those teachings. There was a lot that was taught to me that at
That's
the end of
nothing. That's
that,
amazing. That's amazing. It take me 30 years.
yeah. But I mean, it's not my first lifetime that I've done this kind of stuff either.
Okay, now I
But the
feel
thing
better.
is that the 10 days, really at the end of it, I could walk into a space full of demonic beings, and I would not annihilate them, but I would just be numb going through the space. I would just walk through it and be numb to it. And around 6 to 9 months later of, you know, continued teachings and continued whatever practices, I was just sitting on the couch one day, and all of a sudden it just suddenly all clicked. Everything just suddenly clicked. And I was like, oh my God, they're just like white and black people. And that revelation, that whole aspect could only come through once all that feeling and that emotion and that needing to hold on to how the dark has hurt the light and how the light has hurt the dark, etc., had been released and had been forgiven. And then I saw a ginormous circle of all of my ancestors, all of the ones who had done more heinous things in their lifetimes, come and be welcomed and be respected. And come to greet me. And it was in that moment that then I saw those lifetimes of myself too, much more, you know. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a big process, and even after that, several years after that, it's not till later on that I've been more deliberately focused on deep diving into the emotional space, doing really, really deep mummy and daddy trauma work, that I could really feel into the you know, when you're talking about the black people and white people in America, it's pretty I mean, around the whole world is pretty bad at the moment,
Yeah.
just the divisiveness. But it's that divisiveness that actually resides within ourselves, you know. So yeah, that's just one of the aspects that they taught me was the you know, the dark versus the light thing. And you were touching on a point before about, you know, the, you know, dark wanting to go light. And the thing that they told me was, you know, we were given which side we were going to be on initially, and the universal law says that we are all equals. Everything is all in equanimity and equalness, and it would be unfair for the dark to have to go light in order to ascend, in order to graduate. If the light can just stay light and ascend, the light actually has to go dark too in order to ascend. And actually, it's that whole spectrum of experience that we all need to have before we graduate. And this was a big revelation for me at that point, because I was like, oh yeah, like why would it's like, and there was a part of me that was very ashamed of having fallen from the light, let's say. And I had big memories of being a really, really dark sided individual. Not here on Earth, not just here on Earth, but in Alpha Draconis and other places, and on Orion. And that opened up all of that memory, access to all of that memory and that skill set and that trauma.
Chris, I mean, how do you, I mean, like, because I feel like when all this stuff comes and then you go down to your local coffee shop and say, can I have a latte or a frappuccino? How do you keep like real, like without like being, because you can have a normal conversation as well. And I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people, like, they just like, well, this is a bit scary. I'm not going to be able to be real. I'll be schizophrenic or whatever. But it's like there's something which allows us to kind of, I don't know, like shift worlds and just be, you know, in the, I don't know, the dog's, you know, done a poo on the carpet and I need to clear it up. You know, it's like like a day-to-day reality, you know, earthiness. How do you deal with that? Because I feel like, wow, you're really in touch with so many dimensions. Like, wow.
Yeah. Well, it's a skill that you kind of that I have developed over time, that I have an ability to turn on and off. So there are sometimes some things that are just too hard to turn off. Like for instance, if I just call it like, let's say that there's a whole bunch of unseen beings that have tried to contact me and I've turned it off, you know, because either I'm doing client sessions for the whole day or whatever it is, like I'm busy. And I will have like this sensation of, oh, a whole bunch of people have left me voicemails. So I'll drop into meditation and DMT tunnel comes out, and straight away I'm receiving all these messages that these beings have left for me, you know. So it takes time to develop these skills and an ability to turn them on and off.
Yeah.
You know? And so yeah, it's not like they're always on. I don't need them to be always on. But at the same time, I think that like we talk about like the present moment, needing to be in the present moment a lot, right? And people often might say like, well, if you're thinking of the past and you're thinking of the future all the time and you're experiencing different realities and dimensions, does that not just mean you're not in the present moment? Does it mean that you are too focused on something besides the now? The thing is that the now, the present moment, expands. So this expansiveness we're talking about, consciousness, is that we seem to think that we're like one dimensional and that's all we can be in that one moment. Yeah.
I
But
love it.
like in this one moment, I am connected to multi-dimensional versions of not just like my different avatars in this now, but the past, the present, the future. We're all accessing it all in the now. And it's like, what is it that separates the now and the future and the past?
Yeah.
What is time anyways?
It's so interesting. So you're touching on something where I feel like a wonderful thing happened when Eckhart Tolle brought out The Power of Now, and people started to be here now. But a lot of people have used it to numb themselves. And this girl was kind of I was having a conversation with this very good, lovely lady, and she's doing energy work. And she says, "I try and be in the now." And I almost shouted at her, "There is no now." Yeah, to break it. There is no now, because now is just a concept, is a word concept which we've used to divide up time, and time, by the way, is not divided. And so wherever you are, even if you're in the past, you're in now. Yeah. You know, it's such a, yeah, it's a part of something I like to talk about sometimes with people.
Well, I mean, for me, it's an attachment that we have to a past or a future point. It's an attachment that we have to some type of linearity to an event that either is yet to come, like I want good marks for this exam so that I can pass it. I'm attached to that moment, or I'm regretting something that I did in the past and I can't heal that. I can't forgive myself for it. I'm attached to this thing that happened. And that can be through not just this lifetime, but multitudes of lifetimes. Right. And that attachment is also the now, but it's also holding us back from opening up. an infinite number of possibilities of a future. It restricts us. It like restricts a flow of where we can potentially go. And it creates what I call an emotional compression point. So if I am looking at an exam that I need to do in the future and I need to pass or something,
Right.
and I'm anxious, right? I'm like,
Mm.
oh, this is really important for me. I need to get this done really, really well.
Mm.
What happens is, let's say it's 1 month in the future, and all the points to which I was studying for it and I became anxious, all those days, all those moments within the day, all that fear comes compressed into the one moment of now. And we end up in a big emotional loop, and it
Mm.
creates anxiety. It's the
Mm.
same thing with
Mm.
the
Mm.
past.
Mm.
So I'm ashamed that I did something that I really, really regret, and I'm really sad about it, and I can't change it, and I don't know what to
Right.
do.
Right.
And that happened a month ago. Every single time that I felt that sadness, that shame, etc., on all of those days becomes compressed to the point of now. And I feel that not just as of that moment, but of every single moment from then to now in time fashion compressed into the now.
Well, you kind of like you. What I feel like you're almost going into is how you helping people now. I mean that because I'm thinking like you could have chosen a I sit on a mountain and I'm whoever comes up I'm gonna you know I I, I could see you making a choice and say like there's nothing really to do in this world. Yeah, everything's fine. I'm just gonna sit and whatever comes up comes up. And yet you've chosen the way of of taking this knowledge, wisdom, and opening it up for people so you can say you can help them or facilitate them. So how does that work?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, I've spent enough lifetimes sitting in a monastery that I'm done with that sort of thing. But at the same time, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of amazing esoteric teachings out there, a lot of including Taoism and Buddhism, and like even within the religions themselves.
Sure.
The problem with it is that it might be 70%, 50 to 70% true, but the 30% that's not true has kept us stuck and has flipped the whole message in order to trap us. And so it's like the master who passes on everything except that last teaching
Yeah.
to his pupils. And so the whole thing becomes a waste of time.
Yeah.
And this is very common in all of our lineages. And so therefore, um, everyone has, unfortunately, no one can become enlightened from reading any book of any master. It's just not possible,
Mm.
because every single book and every single text has been just ever so slightly, or some more than others, distorted in a way that we cannot free ourselves with just that text or with just whatever teaching was shared. This is why a lot of teachers refuse to have their message recorded in books, because they knew that this would happen. So the thing is, one of the key things that the Taoists had asked for me to do is, because for me, my mastery in a lot of times has been around the emotional space,
Okay.
not just the heart space, but the
Mm.
emotional space.
Mm.
So what do I mean by that? I mean, for me, it was always about the emotional and feeling centric experience of being human. And what do I mean by that? I mean that that is a direct replication within our skin suit of what the divinity source feels, what a divine source being feels, what a soul feels.
Mm.
Now, innate, built into our bodies. The beauty of the human body is that our bodies actually allow us to receive a full spectrum of feelings and emotions that our soul actually feels. Replication.
Mm.
That's what the, you know, when the Bible says man is made in God's image, this is
Mm.
about the feeling centric space. This is the power that we have. None of it was held back. We have a full blown spectrum of all of it. It was not held back at all.
Mm.
And so because of that though, um, it's very complicated,
Yeah, it's big, huh?
you know,
That's like my
and
brain
most
is just like, my brain's gone to the toilet. Yeah. It'll be back in
and
5 minutes.
most of us are just like, it's just too confusing for me. I don't know what I'm feeling, so I'm just not going to talk to them.
Right.
Okay. And we're given a limited set of linguistics to be able to explain them,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? So, you know, 26 letters of the alphabet, a bit more in Chinese. And it's restricted,
Yeah.
right? How can you possibly choose, you know, there might be 10,000 commonly used words in the dictionary, maybe a couple of thousand. And you're telling me that all of these words can describe exactly how divinity feels?
Mm.
It's just not possible, you
Right.
know, and not accurately anyway. So, but then linguistics has been trapped too. You know, there's polarity built into our language, in
Mm.
good and dark, bad and light and dark, and there's negative and positive connotations that are designed there to keep us divisive in our ways. But
Mm.
it's also in our language is built in elements of needing to have us attached to a past and attached to a future too, like
Mm.
words such as growth. Even when I talk about growth, or I'm talking about or self-growth, I'm talking about me being a better version of my past version of
Yeah.
myself.
Right.
That's already a point of comparison and a point of
Yeah.
competition.
It's
So
linear.
like
Yeah.
there's all these elements, and we talk, it's in the cultural fabric, the
Mm.
language, the cultural fabric, all has polarity and duality built into it.
Absolutely.
So if we actually are to truly exit out of that, we need to look at our language, we need to rephrase certain words, because as truth changes to walking the middle way and not a path of duality, our language has to change too. The words we choose to use don't feel right anymore.
Mm.
So, like walking out of a dark room after 9 days, I couldn't speak to people for 2 weeks because
Mm.
everything that came out of my mouth felt wrong. Like, I
Wow.
was like, this isn't right. This isn't what I'm saying. This just doesn't feel right. And it took me at
Fantastic.
least 2 weeks. I was just stuttering here. I was like, no, that's not the right word. That's not the right word. So it
Mm.
took a long time to rejig the words that I was using,
That's beautiful.
because truth as an expression of oneself and how we're being is distorted by the words
But you
that we're
know
choosing to use through our culture.
what seems to be coming through, if I can say, when I'm talking to you, what seems to be coming through is a very deep core of compassion, because you're having these experiences of like not even being able to speak and giving yourself 2 weeks, whereas other people may just like freak out, like totally freak out, and you've gone, okay, well, it's gonna like it's I feel like I'm trying to feel like, oh, there's this whole level of self-kindness, self-patience, self-compassion, which I think is something you I can imagine that's a great resource for you in your work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like when you talk, when anyone says anything about, excuse me, heart or compassion, I'm always reminded of like a really big mystical experience that I had that was a big part of my awakening journey, which was in 2012, December 21st.
A
At
special
nighttime,
date,
I felt
yeah,
like
yeah.
a very special day, the changing of the equinox.
Mm.
And I was going to dance class, but as I was walking out of work, I was like, I can't actually physically get myself to dance class. I feel like I've got to go home. And so I walked home, and I knew Junvalo was doing a guided meditation at that point in time. I'm like, okay, I need to do this meditation that he's doing. So I just sat on the corner of my bed and I just opened up the web, you know, his live stream. I did this meditation, about 10 minutes into this meditation, 20 minutes maybe into this meditation,
Mm.
I had a heart orgasm. And this was my second meditation ever that I had ever done. And what I,
tell me what that is.
yeah, well, it felt to me like a genital orgasm, but it was coming from my heart, literally.
Yeah,
And my heart was exploding for about 20-25 minutes, in this pure love type feeling that I could just be like, all I could say was, wow, this is what true compassion, unconditional love actually feels like. And I was connected. I felt connected to everything within a 3-meter radius of myself. Like it was the same thing. Like I was that consciousness, and that was me. This is a part of me. And it was a profound experience, mystical experience. I had no idea what the hell I had just experienced.
Yeah.
And that was really what put me on the path of really going very, very deeply into the esoteric to understand.
Wow. I think that's the title of our show. It's got to be like Chris Cheung and his Heart-Orgasm. Yeah. I mean, like, it's catchy. I mean, it's gonna attract people. But yeah. And it's true. I've had, I won't say I've had the same experience, but I've had this like, wow, like that's a whole body orgasm, and I'm just sitting here, like I'm just, just something like beautiful has opened up, and it's joy and relaxation and love. That's beautiful.
And so, I mean, that was really only possible because I had so many walls around my heart, and that had just been building up for really, really long time. It's a bit different when you're already cemented into that space and you're there all the time in this heart, that heart space. It doesn't come up like a big wave. It's like, you only generally grieve and you have a cathartic release if it's been really built up and it's really, really strong wave, right? The same thing like any, that type of experience where you have this big cathartic release.
Totally. It's same with Buddha's enlightenment. He was just gung-ho for enlightenment for however many years, and it's the moment he gave up is when he had his heartgasm, or well, we'll call it enlightenment, but it's a form of kind of deep heartgasm.
And at a more extreme level, like, that's I don't know, stage 1, I would say. Stage 2 of that is when your heart actually begins to glow from inside, literally. So there's one moment where I'd woken up a couple of years ago, and I woke up and my blankets were glowing orange. And I was like, what is glowing orange? And it was daytime.
It's a good question. Scary.
Like, what is glowing?
Right.
And I pulled my bed sheets down, and I saw my heart was actually glowing golden from the inside out. And I was like, come on, I'm still in a dream. What the hell is going on here? What is this that's happening? And so I stayed awake because I was like, I want to know, this isn't a dream. Is this actually happening to me?
Yeah.
And I stayed awake, and it faded, but I stayed awake. I got up and was like, what just happened here? But I know that is a stage 2 where your heart, so it's not just about the heart orgasms. It's like your heart is permanently glowing golden. So yeah, I mean, those are the things that come up when you speak to compassion. But
Chris, there's 2 things. Number one is we're kind of like I kind of like keep things on just practically. I keep things on around about 40 minutes, and we've come, and I feel like, well, we've kind of like scratched the surface, and so I want to extend an invitation to talk to you again, because I think there's a lot we can talk about, and a lot. I mean, there's things that you're touching on that are moving me, which is really nice, and things that I can definitely relate to. And I'm sure a lot of people, like I mean, I feel you're being, in a lot of ways, so brave, but I realize this is just you being who you are, because you're just saying, because I was sharing my experiences, and like I told you things there that I tell people when I've known them for a period of time, because it's just hard for them to get what happened. And I'm like, wow, you've just completely opened up. I'm so grateful to you for that genuineness, and generosity. And the other idea is that we go into like talking about like how a session would look with you, maybe on the next talk, and talk. Yeah, I've got some ideas that we could talk about.
Yeah, sure.
What do you kind of my one question I like to ask, which it doesn't have to be a pithy answer, like, short 2-line answer, but when somebody's having these opening experiences, which, you've had a lot of opening experiences, and you've obviously, a lot of experience. What do you advise somebody else? They're listening to the podcast and they're saying like, well, I had this experience of a being, or I had a heartgasm, or I had, some view. Number one is I feel the podcast is giving them a family and saying like, hey, you're not alone. Yeah. Especially if they really have no frame of reference, because we need to help people build frames of reference. What's the advice that comes to you spontaneously?
It depends.
That's a very good answer. Yeah, it's a very good answer.
Yeah. Let me sit on it for just a moment.
I mean, what I get is listen to your heart and be kind to yourself. That's what I feel Chris Cheung would say to me, is like, listen to your heart and be kind to yourself. But
Yeah.
that's me just channeling you. Sorry. Yeah, take a moment.
It really does depend on the kind of experience and what emotions it brings up for the person. Because generally what happens is when we have a very mystical experience, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic are massively fighting. And because we've been trained so much in a space of fear that the sympathetic system takes over, and we go into a space of fear, actually, mostly fear. And that's the prevalence of that actually shuts down everything else that kind of comes around it. It actually shuts off access to the heart. So if we tell someone who has, let's say, just done a plant journey, an ayahuasca ceremony or something, and they've had some big experiences, even during the experience, it's difficult to tell someone to go into the heart, because when you're anxious and when you're scared and you don't even know that you're scared, like you've gone numb to it, like you're a deer in headlights kind of thing. Or you think you're in psychosis, or you're scared you're in psychosis, or you're scared that you're going crazy, or you're scared that this is actually punching through walls of belief and walls of dogma, challenging the very core of what you thought to be you, your identity, who you identify with, who you know you to be. Like,
Right.
that's all very scary stuff.
Yeah.
It's like you've jumped off the cliff. You're now in what feels like a very unsafe space, right? Because it's beyond the zone of comfortability. You've gone beyond that edge.
Yeah.
When you've got beyond that edge, fear is the first thing that arises mostly. And so
Yeah.
it's that practice. So before anyone ever asks, whenever anyone ever asks me, should I embark on this mystical experience type journey, I always sort of say, what's your behavior and what's your reactiveness towards fear? And in the presence of fear, what do you tend to do? Do you
Yeah.
have a practice, a regular practice of working with fear, not through fear, but with fear? How intimate are you able to become with fear, with monsters in your dream, with robbers who come and haunt you in whatever your daytime, your dream time? How are you able to confront the monsters within all of the spaces that you reside in? What's your approach? And if the answer is, oh, well, that's the first time I've ever heard about this, and that's the first time I've really asked the question, I would kind of say, don't go through with that experience. But the thing is, we can have a practice. There are a lot of people, there's so much like information out there about how to approach fear, like martial arts schools. One of
Right. Right.
it's very well practiced across all the martial arts schools is you're confronting fear. Confrontation is confronting fear itself often. So, you know, like it's what's that practice you have working with fear? Do you tend to shut down? Do you tend to run away?
Right.
What wall do you put up? And it's just acknowledging that and knowing it in your body. Because if you're able to work with that through the body, and you have a practice of doing that, whether it's in a meditational practice and it's through visualization, or whether it's through a sense of movement and it's a yoga or a martial arts or whatever, like we have a way in our bodies then that is therefore practiced, that we can become intimate with the fear, that thing that we're so afraid of isn't so scary anymore. Right.
And you see, what I'm hearing is what I hear is, oh, you're talking about developing compassion, really. I mean, that's what I'm hearing in my mind. It's like this compassion for the self, compassion for whatever is scaring you. Like it's a very big space, and people could come to you if they were like scared, and they would also learn to like maybe work specifically on those fear points. I'm assuming.
Yeah. So self-love and self-worth are very, very big topics of conversation. And generally we find that at the core of most people's fear is this fear of death. And
Agreed.
but it takes many, many different layers and many, many different forms and has many, many different faces. And yes, it is about how to come to love oneself more, but sometimes telling someone just to have compassion for oneself doesn't necessarily help that individual, doesn't really guide them.
Right.
There are a lot more specific techniques.
I mean, what I think people don't realize is like words come, sometimes words come quite cheaply, and it's like a program's kicked in. It's almost like an inner entity is kicked in, and it's running the show. And you're kind of like you feel like you're in the car that's careering down a hill with no brakes. But
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
I love that advice. I mean, it's beautiful. All right. Well,
Yeah, when people have when people have an anxiety attack, it's really difficult, like to help them in any, like it, because it's like this truck that's got no brakes and it's careering down the road. It's so scary. What's going to happen here? This, it's very difficult to work in that space, but it's possible, but difficult. Yeah.
fantastic. Okay. Well, we're going to talk next time. I want to thank you so much. It's a fantastic. I mean, I think it's just great to speak to you. So thank you.
Thank you for all your questions
And
well,
I hope you're gonna come back on the podcast, and we'll
yeah, sure.
go and deep dive a bit more. Thanks.
Yeah, I can talk for hours about anything, really. But
I think you can. We appreciate it.
pleasure. All right, Richard.